Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what am I really avoiding? Not the emails or the bills, not the gym or the diet, but something deeper, something closer, the kind of thing that only shows up in silence, when the lights are off and no one is asking anything from you. That's when it comes. That quiet ache, that subtle tension in the chest, the feeling that something about you is not quite aligned. We say we want to grow, to heal, to evolve. But the truth is, most of us spend a lifetime building castles around our own illusions. Anything to avoid looking at what's broken inside. It's easier to scroll, to blame, to distract. Because facing who we really are, that's terrifying. Think about the last time you were deeply offended by someone. Not just annoyed, offended. Now be honest. Was it really about what they said? Or did they touch something inside you? Something you've worked hard to bury? The truth is, most of what offends us is a mirror. And most of our pain is not from what others do, but from what we refuse to confront within. We all know someone who's incredibly smart, talented, even kind, and yet they sabotage their own potential. They repeat patterns. They push away love. They hide behind masks. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if that person is you? This is not about shame. It's about liberation. Because until you face what you've been running from, you will always be a prisoner of your own fear. Viktor Frankl, the man who survived the concentration camps and gave the world a new psychology rooted in meaning, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But how can you change what you refuse to see? If this resonates with you, if something inside is whispering, "Yes, this is about me," then stay. This might just be the beginning of a different kind of journey, one where the goal isn't perfection, but truth. Tell me in the comments, what's one truth about yourself that you've been avoiding? And if you believe more people need to hear this, like the video and subscribe for more reflections that don't flatter your ego, but awaken your soul. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning without the familiar weight on your chest. No pretending, no rehearsed smiles, just a quiet inner stillness. The kind that comes not from avoiding the truth, but from finally facing it. What would change if instead of escaping your own reflection, you stood before it fully, without judgment, without excuses? What if, for once, you didn't explain yourself away, didn't rationalize the anger, the apathy, the envy, but simply observed it, like a curious scientist or a compassionate friend? Can you picture it? A version of you who no longer wastes energy defending a false self, a version that doesn't crumble at criticism because it's rooted in something deeper than approval. A version of you that, even when things fall apart, remains inwardly whole because they are no longer running from their own brokenness. Now imagine how your relationships would shift, how much lighter your conversations would feel if you didn't have to filter every word through insecurity or pride. Imagine what kind of partner, friend, or parent you'd be if your inner world was no longer driven by fear of being found out. This isn't some fantasy. This is what happens when a person chooses truth over image. It's what happens when we stop asking, "How can I appear better?" and start asking, "What do I need to face in myself?" But let's be honest, this choice isn't easy. There's a reason most people avoid it. Because to stop running means you will feel things you've spent years trying not to feel. Grief, regret, shame, maybe even despair. But here's the paradox. Once you let them in, they lose their power. Like a storm that passes through, leaving the air clearer. Viktor Frankl wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And the first step to finding that meaning is to stop numbing the pain long enough to hear what it's been trying to say. So let me ask you, who would you be if you didn't have to hide anymore? Visualize that person. Not a perfect person, but an honest one, a whole one. And know this, they are already in you, waiting to be uncovered, not constructed. Your journey begins not with improvement, but with truth. Let's confront something uncomfortable. Much of what we call self-improvement is actually self-avoidance in disguise. You think you're evolving because you're reading the right books, listening to the right podcasts, practicing meditation, or hitting the gym consistently. But deep down, something still feels off. You feel restless, easily triggered, secretly insecure. Why? Because you're fixing the surface while neglecting the foundation. We live in a culture obsessed with performance, optimized routines, 5-step plans, life hacks. But none of it matters if the person doing all of it is still running from their inner wounds. You can have the most productive morning in the world and still crumble when your partner criticizes you. You can post inspiring quotes and still feel like a fraud. You can be admired by others and still hate yourself when you're alone. The truth is, your greatest enemy isn't your lack of discipline or motivation. It's your unwillingness to confront the parts of you that scare you, the shameful memories, the deep disappointments, the hidden anger. You keep trying to build a better version of yourself on top of unhealed ruins. That's like painting over mold. It might look fine for a while, but eventually the cracks will show. And here's the real twist. The very things you're running from are often the exact source of your transformation. The wound you deny might be the doorway to your depth. The flaw you hate might be the seed of your empathy. The pain you suppress might be the birthplace of your purpose. Viktor Frankl didn't discover meaning in comfort. He discovered it in unimaginable suffering. And his lesson was this: avoiding pain doesn't heal it. Facing it, understanding it, transcends it. So ask yourself, have I been improving or just avoiding? What if your need to constantly fix yourself is just another form of resistance? What if healing isn't about becoming someone new, but becoming someone real? Until you stop treating your inner life like a problem to be solved, you'll keep circling the same emptiness. But when you finally sit with your truth, raw, unfiltered, even ugly, that's where the transformation begins. Not in the performance, but in the presence. To understand why running from your truth is so destructive, and why facing it is so liberating, we need to turn to someone who had every reason to run, yet didn't: Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. He lost his wife, his parents, his freedom. Everything external was stripped away. And yet, in that pit of human suffering, he discovered something profound: that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose. What does that mean for you? It means no matter how painful your past, no matter how distorted your self-image has become, you are not defined by your wounds. You are defined by what you do with them. Frankl didn't romanticize suffering, but he showed us that even the worst pain can reveal a deeper truth about who we are, if we allow it. He called this search for meaning the core of human existence. Not pleasure, not success, but meaning. And meaning, he said, is not given to us. It's discovered, often through struggle. But here's what most people miss. You can't find meaning if you keep lying to yourself. And most of us lie more than we realize. We say we're fine when we're not. We say we've moved on when we haven't. We say we're working on ourselves when we're really just avoiding the real work. Sitting still, facing the silence, asking the hard questions. Frankl's life teaches us that true freedom is internal. It's not about escaping discomfort, it's about transforming it. And that transformation begins the moment we stop negotiating with our pain and start listening to it. Ask yourself, what have I been unwilling to feel? What truth about me have I locked behind productivity, humor, or even kindness? You don't need to be in a concentration camp to suffer. Life brings its own silent prisons: regret, resentment, restlessness. But you hold the key. And that key is self-confrontation, not to punish, but to redeem. Frankl proved that even in the darkest places, the human spirit can rise, if it's anchored in truth. So don't just admire his courage. Practice it. Start by telling the truth to yourself. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't scream, it doesn't break things or collapse in tears. It's quiet, subtle. It shows up in procrastination, in sarcasm, in overachievement. It hides behind your "I'm just tired" or "that's just how I am." But underneath, it's something else entirely: self-betrayal. One of the most dangerous patterns you can fall into is pretending you don't know what's really going on inside. You do know. You've always known. But knowing requires courage. And courage is painful, especially when you've built an identity on avoiding yourself. So you create micro-escapes, Scrolling, binge-watching, gossiping, fantasizing. Not because you're lazy or undisciplined, but because something inside you is afraid to stop and look. Afraid of what it might see. And over time, this becomes a lifestyle. You start reacting instead of reflecting, performing instead of being. You become a stranger to your own soul. Here's where it gets tricky. The world often rewards these patterns. It praises your productivity. It admires your charm. It doesn't see that you're exhausted from hiding, so you keep the mask on until something breaks, a relationship ends, a job falls apart, or worse, everything stays intact, but you feel nothing. Viktor Frankl warned of this. The existential vacuum, a sense of emptiness that emerges not from hardship, but from a lack of meaning. And this vacuum often goes unnoticed because it's not dramatic. It's slow erosion, a deadness of the spirit that you cover up with busyness or ambition. But the signs are there. The overreactions, the emotional numbness, the inability to be alone without stimulation. These aren't flaws. They're signals. Signals that some part of you is begging to be heard, begging to be seen. So what are you really running from? Maybe it's a childhood wound, a past failure, a deep disappointment that still echoes in your mind. Whatever it is, pretending it doesn't matter won't make it go away. It will just shape your life from the shadows. The good news, the moment you name it, the moment you sit with it, even briefly, you begin to reclaim your power. So stop asking, why am I like this? Start asking, what part of me have I left behind? And listen closely, because that voice you've been avoiding might just be your soul trying to come home. There are moments in life when a single sentence can hit you like a lightning bolt, not because it's new, but because it's finally undeniable. So here's a few to sit with. Let them land where they need to. You can't heal from what you refuse to feel. That ache in your chest, that tension in your gut, it's not just stress. It's a message. And the more you silence it, the louder it becomes. Through your habits, your moods, your relationships. Pain doesn't disappear. It transforms, or it festers. Most of your emotional pain isn't about what happened. It's about what you've told yourself since. You didn't just experience rejection. You started believing you're unlovable. You weren't just criticized. You internalized the voice of shame. The event is over. The story you built around it isn't. And that story is what's hurting you now. Avoidance is not peace. It's emotional debt. Every truth you delay will charge you interest. Sooner or later, the bill comes due. Through burnout, resentment, disconnection. Real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict, but from facing it with integrity. Your ego protects you, but it also imprisons you. It tells you to act tough when you're scared, to smile when you're breaking, to deflect when you're guilty. But true strength isn't in the mask, it's in the honesty behind it. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be faced. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be understood. Healing isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming someone honest. Each of these truths carries weight. They can't be skimmed. They demand pause, reflection, maybe even grief. Because when a lie you've lived with starts to crack, it hurts. But in that fracture, something else becomes possible. Freedom. Viktor Frankl didn't offer comfort, he offered clarity. And clarity, while painful, is the beginning of meaning. He taught us that suffering can be redemptive only when we stop pretending. So let these truths unsettle you. Let them break the illusions you've clung to. And then let them rebuild something better. Not just a stronger self, but a more truthful one. You want change? Start with truth. And let it be sharp. Let it be real. Because fake peace will never lead to real healing. We've been told a lie. That strength means having it all together. That to be strong is to never break, never cry, never need. But here's the paradox that most people miss. Real strength begins where the performance ends. You don't become strong by pretending you're fine. You become strong by admitting when you're not. Think of the people you truly admire, not for their success but for their depth. Chances are they've suffered, they've failed, they've lost something or someone. But what sets them apart isn't what happened to them. It's what they did with it. They faced it. They didn't numb it or bury it under layers of pride. They let it shape them. Viktor Frankl understood this deeply. He wrote that what is to give light must endure burning, not avoid it, not talk around it, endure it. That's where transformation begins, not in denial, but in honest confrontation with suffering. Here's the twist. The very thing you're hiding is the thing that could heal someone else. Your vulnerability isn't weakness, it's access. It makes you human. It makes you trustworthy. It makes you real. We think we'll be loved for our competence, but the truth is we're loved most deeply when we're seen completely. And yet we resist it. Why? Because truth feels dangerous when your identity is built on image. To show who you really are, wounds and all, means risking rejection. But here's another paradox. The longer you hide, the more disconnected you become, even from those who love you. So what's more painful in the end? Being rejected for who you are, or being accepted for someone you're not? There is no wholeness without honesty, and honesty requires paradoxical courage. The courage to admit fear, to admit doubt, to admit that you don't always know what you're doing. But that's the kind of courage that changes lives. So here's a question to wrestle with. What if your greatest strength isn't your confidence, but your confession? What if being fully known is the doorway to being truly free? The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more honest ones. Let that sink in. It's easy to assume that facing your truth will only bring pain. And yes, there is pain. The sting of regret, the weight of memories you've tried to forget, the discomfort of realizing how much time you've wasted trying to be someone you're not. But here's the part no one tells you. On the other side of that pain is a kind of freedom you've never known. Because when you stop lying to yourself, something extraordinary happens. You start to breathe. You're no longer editing your emotions to fit someone else's expectations. You're no longer performing roles that exhaust you. You're no longer afraid that someone will find out who you really are, because you've already faced that person, and you've made peace. You begin to feel lighter, not because life is easier, but because you're no longer carrying the burden of pretending. You no longer fear being alone because silence is no longer a threat. It becomes a sanctuary. Your relationships change too. You start attracting people who aren't drawn to your image, but to your essence. Conversations become deeper. Conflicts become more honest. Love becomes more real, because it's no longer based on who you're trying to be. It's based on who you are. Viktor Frankl wrote that happiness cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And that happens when you align your outer life with your inner truth. When you stop chasing validation and start embodying meaning. The reward isn't perfection. It's congruence. And congruence feels like peace. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to impress anyone. Imagine receiving criticism without collapsing. Imagine choosing your path, not because it looks good, but because it feels true. That's the reward of truth. It's not instant. It's not easy. But it's real. And once you taste it, you won't want to go back. So the question is, what's that worth to you? Would you rather live a life that looks good or one that feels right? Because you can't have both. Not if you're still running. But if you really stop, you'll find that what you feared most wasn't the truth itself, but how long you've lived without it. And now, you don't have to. Behind every decision you make, every emotion you suppress, every reaction you can't quite explain, there's a structure. A hidden architecture built over years of experience, belief, and memory. And whether you're aware of it or not, that structure is shaping everything. This is where psychology meets philosophy. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy offers a powerful framework. The belief that our deepest drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. And that meaning is often discovered through suffering, through responsibility, and through confronting life as it really is, not as we wish it to be. But most of us have been trained in the opposite. We've inherited a mindset rooted in avoidance. Avoid pain, avoid failure, avoid uncertainty. This creates an inner life that's reactive, shallow, and fragile. We try to manage symptoms, anxiety, anger, addiction, without questioning the beliefs and patterns that produce them. Frankl saw human beings as more than machines reacting to stimuli. He saw us as moral agents, capable of reflection, conscience, and transcendence. And that changes everything, because it means your suffering isn't just something to escape. It's a signal, a question, a potential turning point. Now let's go deeper. St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the foundational thinkers of Western philosophy, taught that truth is the alignment between the mind and reality. That means healing begins not with feeling better, but with seeing more clearly. If your inner architecture is built on distortions like, "I'm not enough," "I must always be in control," or, "If people really knew me, they'd leave," then your life will reflect those lies. Facing the truth about yourself isn't about self-judgment. It's about reconstruction. You don't need to tear yourself down. You need to rebuild on something solid. And that something is reality. Not the version you inherited, not the one culture sells, but the one you discover in silence, in solitude, in honest self-confrontation. This is the real work. And it's slow. It's unglamorous. It doesn't get applause. But it creates something unshakable: character. And when character becomes your foundation, everything changes. Your emotions stabilize. Your relationships deepen. Your purpose clarifies. Not because life got easier, but because you became truer. That's the architecture of a meaningful life. And it's built, one truth at a time. At some point, you have to stop running. Not because life finally gets calm. Not because everything falls into place, but because you're tired. Tired of editing yourself, tired of pretending, tired of building your life around what you hope others never find out. And when that moment comes, when you finally choose to look in the mirror, not to fix your hair or adjust your mask, but to see, something shifts. You don't crumble. You don't disappear. You don't lose yourself. You meet yourself, maybe for the first time. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You'll see fear in your eyes. You'll see pain you've tried to bury. You'll feel the weight of choices, of missed chances, of silent wounds. But you'll also see something else, something deeper, the possibility of redemption. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond repair. You are not defined by your past. You are shaped by what you choose now. Viktor Frankl reminded us that even in the bleakest conditions, meaning is possible. Not because life is easy, but because you are capable of depth, of responsibility, of truth. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness comes through honesty. So here's what I want from you. Not as a YouTube creator, but as someone walking this path too. Leave a comment with one truth about yourself you're ready to face. Not for likes, not for validation, but as a declaration, a moment of courage. Because the truth is contagious. When you share yours, you give someone else permission to share theirs. And if this video stirred something in you, if you felt seen, challenged, or awakened, then don't keep that to yourself. Like the video. Share it. Subscribe. Not because it helps the channel, but because it helps build a space where truth is not punished, but welcomed. You don't need another guru. You don't need more motivation. You need a mirror, and the courage to stand in front of it with open eyes and a willing heart. The real journey doesn't begin when you add something new. It begins when you finally stop lying. Now, what's the one truth you've been avoiding? Write it below, and take your first step home.